Hi, this is Freedom from Condo Planet. I want to welcome you to another episode of our video series on condos for rent in Mississauga. Today I want to address the question of, can you be evicted for not paying your rent? Paying your rent is one of the biggest responsibilities and most important responsibility of a tenant. And not only have to pay your rent, you got to pay it in full and pay it on time. Not doing so can result in eviction. So that's a fact. That's why it's very important for you to understand the rules surrounding payment of your rent when it comes down to your Mississauga condo. Now, what does it mean to pay your rent on time? According to the Residential Tenancies Act, as a tenant, you're required to pay by midnight of the day which it is due. Okay, so it's very important for you to clarify what day your rent is due because you have to make the payment by midnight. One of the common questions we receive is, well, what if I can't pay the rent in full? Is a partial payment good enough? Well, obviously paying something is always better than paying nothing. But unfortunately, unless you pay your rent in full, which is your obligation, the landlord still has grounds to take action. They can still file a notice to demand that their rent is paid, and they can even go further to demand that if it's not paid, you've got to leave the premises. Okay, so that's how far it could go. Now, the landlord has two options available. The first option is that the landlord can file a notice requesting tenant either pay the rent, owing, or move out by a specified date called the termination date. To take this course of action, they need to file the form called N4, Notice to End a Tenancy Early for Non-Payment of Rent. Okay? And on this form, it clearly states how much rent the tenant owes, that they must either pay the rent or move out by the termination date, and if they don't move out by the termination date, the landlord can file for an eviction. Okay? Now, if the tenant does pay the rent by the termination date, the notice is void and everything returns to normal. Okay? So you as a tenant can do something. If you happen to receive this N4, you can remedy the situation by paying the rent by the termination date. Now, one thing you need to take note of is that if you receive an N4, you're still responsible for additional rents that end up being due after that notice is filed to you, okay? So you're still responsible for the extra rent owing. The second course of action that's available for a landlord is really what a lot of landlords tend to resort to, is if they have a good relationship with you, the tenant, they're not going to want to demand you to leave. They probably just want you to pay the rent and for life to return to normal. You continue to live in the condo and carry on as before. So in order to exercise that action, they need to file a notice called L9, which is named Application to Collect Rent the Tenant Owes. Now, regardless of the option that the landlord exercises, hearings are always mediated by the Landlord and Tenant Board, okay? And they take place if tenants do not pay their rent in full and do not remedy the situation. As a tenant of Mississauga condo, one of the most important things you need to take note of from this video is that it's very important for you to stay on top of your rental payments. Missed payments can provoke measures taken that might otherwise be avoided with some good planning. If you have any further questions or concerns, you can always reach us here at condoplanet.ca. Thanks for tuning in. Take care.